I've heard many great things about this video here. It's called, actually I don't even know. Yeah, it's from this conference, Slow Growing a Language. The guy's name was told to me, but I forgot it. But yes, watch it. Apparently it's very good. Some people say it's their favourite talk about programming language design. So naturally, I have to watch it. If it loads, of course. Yeah. Just trying to think if I should close any of these tabs. The issue is, like, if I close Discord, it doesn't close right now. And there's kind of an issue where if I try to force it to quit, it will literally just stop working altogether. My friend's playing GTA 5. As of 1 minute ago. I know he's switching different scenes. What's my thing? 6 hours! Jesus Christ, I'm near of him. Well, you know, gotta flex it somehow. Also with my obsidian setup, these are always open. But these shouldn't use much RAM, given they're like pretty much just text processors, right? But I'll close these tabs in case those or anything. Right, anyway. No idea what this is about, by the way. No idea what he even talks about. All I know is that it says growing a language, so we'll see. It doesn't even have that many views or anything. But given how niche programming language design tends to be, especially like in like the deeper parts of the community where like they really care about the language design and like aren't just creating a language for the sake of, I don't know, I don't know. This is, yeah, I would expect things to be quite niche. (1998), by the way. So some interesting historical view, context, I don't know. Wow. That's probably like hand drawn. Look at that projector.
Most of the time I do not read my talks. I plan the main points and then speak off the top of my head. But for this talk, I need to stick to a text and for good cause. Please bear with me. I think you know what a man is. A woman is more or less like a man, but not of the same sex. This may seem less like a man, but not of the same sex. What a man is. A woman is more or less like a man, but not of the same sex. This may seem like a strange thing for me to start with, but soon you will see why. Next, I shall say that a person is a woman or a man, young or old. And to keep things short, when I say he, I mean he or she, and when I say his, I mean his or her. A machine is a thing that can do a task with no help, or not much help, from a person.
Not really important, but I don't understand why they use he and his to be gender neutral as opposed to they and their. Maybe it was like an effort to like standardize gender neutral pronouns in general and have he and him be that and his, which, you know, that makes sense, I guess. But otherwise, we have gender neutral pronouns in English already.
As a rule, we can speak of two or more of a thing if we add an S or Z sound to the end of a word that names it.
Oh my god. Look at the hand manual.
These are names of persons. Alan Turing, Alonzo Church, Charles K. Ogden, Christopher Alexander, Eric Raymond, Fred Brooks, John Horton Conway, James Gosling, Bill Joy, and Dick Gabriel.
Can the audience see these slides, or are they looking at pieces of paper right now, being like projected? There's no way.
The word other means not the same. The phrase other than means not the same as. A number may be naught, or maybe one more than a number.
Naught.
In this way, we have a set of numbers with no bound. There are other numbers as well, but I shall not speak more of them yet. These numbers, naught, or one more than a number, can be used to count things. We can add two numbers if we count up from the first number, while we count down from the number that is not the first till it come to naught. Then the first count is the sum. We shall take the word many to mean more than two in number.
What's that funny?
Now, think of a machine that can keep track of two numbers and count each one up or down, and test if a number be naught, and by such a test, choose to do this or that. The list of things it can do and the choices that it can make must be of a known size that is some number. Here you can see two numbers and a list. Each row in the list has a state name, the word up or down, and which number to count up or count down. For up, we have the name of the next state to go to, and the machine counts the number up by 1. For down, the machine first tests the number, and so we have the name of the new state to go to if the number be naught, and the name of the new state to go to if the number be other than naught, in which case the machine counts the number down by 1.
I'm so lost right now.
A computer is a machine that can do at least what that machine can. And we have good cause to think that if a computer task can be done at all, then the two-number machine can do it too, if you put numbers in and read them out.
I think there's another version of this video that cuts out all like the big gaps. But, oh, fuck it.
In the right way. In some sense, all computers are the same. We know this thanks to the work of such persons as Alan Turing and Alonzo Church.
I hear laughter in the background. I swear it's not funny.
A vocabulary is a set of words. A language is a vocabulary and rules for what a string of words might mean to a person or a machine that hears them. To define a word is to tell what it means. When you define a word, you add it to your vocabulary and to the vocabulary of each person who hears you. Then you can use the word. To program is to make up a list of things to do and choices to make. To be done by a computer. Such a list is called a program. Next, a noun can be made from a verb to mean that which is done as meant by the verb. To make such a noun, we add ing to the verb stem. Thus, we can speak of programming. A programming language is a language that we can use to tell a computer a program to do. Java is a brand name for a computer programming language. I shall speak of the Java programming language a great deal more in this talk. I have to say the full phrase, the Java programming language, for there is a guy who works where I do who deals with the laws of marks of trade, and he told me I have to say it that way.
I keep hearing laughter in the background. Okay, I guess that was a joke.
Names of other programming languages are Fortran, APL, Pascal, and PL1. A part of a program that defines a new word for use in other parts of the program is called a definition. Mm-hmm. Not all programming languages have a way to code definitions, but most do. Those that do not are for wimps.
What?
Should a programming language be large or small? A small programming language might take but a short time to learn. A large programming language may take a long, long time to learn, but then it is less hard to use. For then we have a lot of words at hand, or I should say at the tips of our tongues, to use at the drop of a hat. If we start with a small language, then in most cases we cannot say much at the start. We must first define more words. Then we can speak of the main thing that is on our mind.
Okay.
We can use a verb in the past tense if we add a d or ed sound at the end of the verb. In the same way, we can form what we call a past participle, which is a form of the verb that says of a noun that what the verb means has been done to it. For this talk, I wanted to show you what it is like to use a language that is much too small. You've now had a good taste of it. I must next define a few more words. An example is some one thing out of a set of things that I put in front of you so that you can see how some part of that thing is in fact a part of each thing in the set. A syllable is a bit of sound that a mouth and a tongue can say all at one time, more or less, in a smooth way. Each word is made up of one or more syllables. A primitive is a word for which we can take it for granted that we all know what it means.
On gas, bro?
For this talk, I chose to take as my primitives all the words of one syllable and no more. from the language I use for most of my speech each day, which is called English. My firm rule for this...
Yeah.
For this talk, I chose to take as my primitives all the words of one syllable and no more.
Yeah, someone pointed out this out in the comments where if you listen back to his thing, all his words are one syllable, which is pretty cool. I'm so lost though. Like, what? Where's this going?
From the language I use for most of my speech each day, which is called English.
Garbage
My
collection?
firm rule for this talk is
What?
that if I need to use a word of 2 or more syllables, I must first define it. Thank you. Now you see. I can do this by defining one word at a time, and I have done so, or I can give a rule by which a new word can be made from some other known word, so that many new words can be defined at once, and I've done this as well. This choice to start with just words of one syllable was why I had to define the word woman, but could take the word man for granted. I wanted to define the word machine in terms of the word person, and it seemed least hard to define person as a man or a woman. But then by chance, the word man has one syllable, and so is a primitive in English, but the word woman has 2 syllables, and so I had to define it. In a language other than English, the words that mean man and woman might each have 1 syllable, or might each have 2 syllables, in which case one would have to take some other tack. We have to do this a lot when we write real computer programs. A thought that seems like a primitive in our minds turns out not to be a primitive in a programming language, and in each new program we must define it once more. A good example of this is max, which yields the more large of 2 numbers. It is a primitive thought to me, but few programming languages have it as a primitive. I have to define it. This is the sort of thing that makes a computer look like a person who is but 4 years old. Next to English, all computer programming languages are small. As we write code, we must stop now and then to define some new term that we will need to use in more than one place. Some persons find that their programs have a few large chunks of code that do the real work, plus a large pile of small bits of code that define new words, so to speak, to be used as if they were primitives. I hope that this talk brings home to you in a way that you can feel in your heart, not just think in your head, what it is like to have to program in that way. This should show you true to life what it is like to use a small language. Each time I've tried this sort of thing, I've found that I cannot say much at all till I take the time to define at least a few new terms. In other words, if you want to get far at all with a small language, you must first add to the small language to make a language that is more large.
This is 1998. So I assume this is the standard library for C++ was made already? When was C++? Okay. 1994. Wow. So 4 years before this talk, the C++ standard template library was released. And I believe that was also unusual for the time. I don't think languages tended to come with much of a standard library at all. So it's quite interesting. I also don't know how popular C++ was at this time. When did C++ become popular? 1983 was the first version. Quickly gained popularity. Okay, so like it's yeah, not too bad then. But yeah, what you said about like max, for instance, right? Defining the max. That's not really something that you have to do in most languages, right? Like I'm sure there's like a standard max function or whatever in like other languages. I know Haskell has one, I believe. Not the best example, but it's like just like a random example. So it's interesting how this has aged.
In some cases, we will find it more smooth to add the syllable er.
Okay, hold on. The talk is called growing a language, right? So I wonder if that's what this will go on about then? Making a language bigger, with more features, perhaps?
To the end of a word. Then to use the word more in front of it. In this way, we might say smoother in place of more smooth. Let me add that better means more good.
I'm sorry, why is that funny? Like genuinely, like, I don't understand where there is a joke in that.
If you want to get far at all with a small language, you must first add to the small language to make a language that is more large.
More large.
In some cases, we will find it more smooth to add the syllable to the end of a word.
Okay, so that's a joke. He said more.
Then to use the word more in front of it. In this way, we might say smoother in place of more smooth. Let me add that better means more good. In truth, the words of one syllable form quite a rich vocabulary with which you can say many things. You may note that this vocabulary is much larger than that of a language called Basic English, defined by Charles K. Ogden in the year 1930.
Okay. Yeah, clearly I'm just slow and the audience is getting it. He's intentionally not using certain words, right? I assume he said not, because he can't say zero, because that's 2 syllables. Okay, bravo. Good audience. Way more attentive than me, apparently.
I chose not to use Basic English for this talk, the cause being that Basic English has many words with 2 or more syllables, some of them quite long, handed down to us from the dim past of Rome. While Basic English has fewer words, it does not give the feel to one who speaks full English of being a small language. By the way, from now on, I shall use the word because to mean the cause being that. If we look at English and then at programming languages, we see that all our programming languages seem small, and yet we can say, too, in some cases, that one programming language is smaller than some other programming language. A design is a plan for how to build a thing. To design is to build a thing in one's mind, but not yet in the real world. Or better yet, to plan how the real thing can be built. The main thing that I want to ask in this talk is, if I want to help other persons to write all sorts of programs, should I design a small programming language or a large one? I stand on this claim. I should not design a small language, and I should not design a large one. I need to design a language that can grow. I need to plan ways in which it might grow, but I need to leave some choices so that other persons can make those choices at a later time.
Okay, now we're talking. Create my language so that it can grow. And I wonder if that even applies to... Like grow in what way? Like to add new features even? New syntax? I wonder... Or is he talking more like from like a library standpoint? But I assume not. Like... Or maybe that's just because we take things for granted. Like C, I guess, is limited in how much it can grow its like libraries because of the limitations on like generics. But like, is that really, does that count? I don't know. Let's see.
This is not a new thought. We've known for some time that huge programs cannot be coded from scratch all at once. There has to be a plan for growth. What we must stop to think on now is the fact that languages have now reached that large size where they cannot be designed all at once, much less built all at once.
Interesting.
Let me pause to define some names for numbers. 20 is twice 10. 30 is thrice 10. 40 is twice 20. 100 is 10 times 10. A million is 100 times 100 times 100. 16 is twice 8. 7 is 1 plus 6. 50 is 1 more than 7 squared. One more thing. Ago means in the past, counting back from now. In the past, it made sense to design a whole language once for all. Fortran was a small language 40 years ago, designed for tests with numbers, and it served well. PL1 was thought a big language 30 years ago, but now we would think of it as small. Pascal was designed as a small whole language with no plan to add to it later. That was 5 and 20 years ago. What came to pass? Fortran has grown and grown. Many new words and many new rules have been added. The new design is not bad. The parts fit well, one with the other. But to many programmers who have used Fortran for a long time, the Fortran of here and now is not at all the same as the language they first came to know and love. It looks strange. PL1 has not grown much. It is, for the most part, just as it was when it first came out. It may be that this is from lack of use. The flip side is that the lack of use may have two causes. Number one, PL1 was not designed to grow. It was designed to be all things to all programmers right from the start. Number two, for its time, it started out large. No one knew all of PL1. Some said that no one could know all of PL1. Pascal grew just a tad and was used to build many large programs. One main fault of the first design was that strings were hard to use because they were all a fixed size. Pascal would have been of no use for the building of large programs for use in the real world if this had not been changed. But Weert had not planned for the language to change in such ways, and in fact, few changes were made. At times we think of C as a small language designed from whole cloth, but it grew out of a smaller language called B, and has since grown to be a larger language called C++. A language as large as C++ could not have spread so wide if it had been foisted on the world all at once.
It is interesting, nowadays people very much treat C++ and C as like different languages, and they are different languages, of course. But whenever I watch a lot of these old talks, like older talks, the sentiment around C++ seems to be more that C and C++ are one language, which is weird, right? But like treated as one language, where C++ is like the expansion of C almost, like the evolution of C, such that C has become C++. Whereas nowadays, if you said that, it'd be really controversial. People say, C has not become C++, what do you mean? It's a completely different language. C++ is a terrible language. We use C instead. But, yeah, it seems like a lot of people held this opinion instead, which was that C did become C++, which is very interesting, because it sounds like C has become, like, deprecated, right? And it probably was for a long time, until C++, I guess people got fed up with C++'s complexity. I still think C++ is a better language. You know, whether or not you like all the features, you should like all the features. A lot of them are not great, but like you don't have to use them. And a lot of the new features are actually really good. And you know, at its worst, C++ is just C with, I mean, not just, but like C++, like you can write C in C++. there are some exceptions, but like they're not major enough that it would impact you. So like, why not just use C++ anyway? There are different reasons, but like I mean like on like a personal level, if you're making a project and you don't care about, I don't know, the possibility of someone misusing C++ to make your thing more complicated when it doesn't need to be. I mean like just like in general as like a programmer yourself, I don't know. Why not take advantage of that tooling? Anyway, that's a bit off topic though. Also yeah, B, right? C coming after B. No one talks about B anymore. Maybe C is too complex. We should go back to B. I don't know. I haven't looked at B though, or BPCL, whatever it's called.
It would have been too hard to port. Called B, and has since grown to be a larger language called C++. A language as large as C++ could not have spread so wide if it had been foisted on the world all at once. It would have been too hard to port.
Yep.
One more rule for making words. If we add the syllable to a verb stem, we make a noun that names the person or thing that does what the verb says to do. For example, a buyer is one who buys. A user is one who uses. As you may by now have guessed, I am of like mind with my good friend Dick Gabriel, here in the front row, who wrote the well-known screed, Worse is Better. The real name was Lisp, good news, bad news, how to win big, which is all words with just one syllable. Which might seem like good luck for me, but the truth is that Dick Gabriel knew how to choose words with punch. Yet what first comes to mind for most persons is the part-headed, worse is better, and so that's how they cite it. The gist of it is that the best way to get a language used by many persons is not to design and build the right thing, because that will take too long. In a race, a small language with warts will beat a well-designed language because users will not wait for the right thing. They will use the language that is quick and cheap, and put up with the warts. Once a small language fills a niche, it is hard to take its place. Well then, could not the right thing be a small language, not hard to port, but with no warts? I guess it could be done, but I, for one, am not that smart, or have not had that much luck. But in fact, I think it cannot be done. 5 and 20 years ago, when users did not want that much from a language, one could try. Scheme was my best shot at it. But users will not now, with glad cries, glom onto a language that gives them no more than what Scheme or Pascal gave them. They need to paint bits, lines, and boxes on the screen, in queues, bright and wild. They need to talk to printers and servers through the net. They need to load code on the fly. They need their programs to work with other code they don't trust. They need to run code in many threads and on many machines. They need to deal with text and sayings in all the world's languages. A small programming language just won't cut it. So a small language cannot do the job right, and a large language takes too long to get off the ground.
It's like a generational.
Are we doomed to use small languages
video.
with many warts because that is the sole kind of design that can make it in the world? At one time, this thought filled me with gloom. But then I saw a gap in my thinking. I said that users will not wait for the right thing, but will use what comes first and put up with the warts. But users will not put up with the warts for all time.
True.
It is not long till they scream and moan and beg for changes.
True.
The small language will grow. The warts will be shaved off or patched.
Hopefully.
If one person does all the work, then growth will be slow. But if one lets the users help do the work, growth can be quick. If many persons work side by side, and the best work is added with care and good taste, a great deal can be added in a short time.
It's open source before open source. Hold on. When was open source started? Like the movement. Oh, 50s and 60s. Okay, never mind. But Richard Stallman was 1983. Popularized in 1998 when this talk came out.
APL was designed by one man, a smart man, and I love APL, but it had a flaw that I think has all but killed it. There was no way for a user to grow the language in a smooth way. In most languages, a user can at least define some new words to stand for other pieces of code that can then be called in such a way that the new words look like primitives. In this way, a user can build a larger language to meet his needs. But in APL, new words defined by the user...
Sorry, that's a very interesting way about thinking of a language, by the way. Like, you are defining your own words as if they were primitives in the language. That's very interesting. Because, like, when you think about defining stuff, you think about defining functions and variables, and that's pretty much it. And types, I guess, too, right? Those are, like, the big three. But you can go beyond that if the language allows you to have that, like, level of meta-programming. So it's interesting. Like, define your own concepts, even. I don't know. I mean, like, it's not that crazy, but, like, I'm just thinking, like... How much can you give the user, like, power in terms of influence over the language without making the language too hard to read for other people? It's just a thought, I don't know.
Do not look like language primitives at all. The name of a piece of user code is a word, but things that are built in are named by strange glyphs. To add what look like new primitives, to keep the feel of the language takes a real hacker and a ton of work. This has stopped users from helping to grow the language. APL has grown some, but the work has been done by just a few programmers that have the source code. If a user adds to APL, and what he added seems like a good idea to the hackers in charge of the language, they might then make it be built in, but the code to use it would not look the same. The user would have to change his code to a new form, because in APL, a use of what is built in does not look at all like a call to user code.
Sorry, talking about APL as if it's a normal language is so weird. Like, have you seen APL? Okay, it's an array-based programming language. There we go. Like, this is APL. And you need a special APL keyboard just to write it, and it's like, it's weird how this is being taught as if it's like a normal language, where nowadays it's like, it looks very esoteric. But I don't think it was designed to be esoteric per se. I think it was actually designed to be like a legit language. What is that? It's tasty, but why is that there? Anyway.
Lisp was designed by one man, a smart man, and it works in a way that I think he did not plan for.
Yeah.
In Lisp, new words defined by the user look like primitives, and what is more, all primitives look like words defined by the user. In other words, if a user has good taste in defining new words, what comes out is a larger language that has no seams. The designer in charge can grow the language with close to no work on his part, just by choosing with care from the work of many users. And Lisp...
This is so weird, because I know zero Lisp projects, except for Emacs that uses Lisp, the Emacs Lisp. I don't know anything else that uses Lisp, and yet it's talked about so much. Not to mention that Lisp was the second programming language ever made, right? The first implemented programming language. And that's just misremembering. Autocode. Yeah, but first commercial language. It was Fortran. Right. And then I think Lisp was a second language. Flowmatic. Huh. Or not. When was Lisp made? 1950, 1958. Okay. I mean, very close to it, right? To being up to Fortran. So it's kind of crazy how old it is, and yet less it's used so much, because again, I haven't seen people actually use it, although I'm aware that people who do use it. I just don't know any projects that do use it. Same with Haskell, I guess. I can't really think of any projects right now that are built in Haskell besides the Haskell compiler. If it even is, I don't know if that's true or not. Maybe it's supposed to C. In fact, it probably is supposed to C, because it kind of has to be, right? And unless it's bootstrapped, but then that's probably not the safest thing to do, because it's, yeah, I don't know. Anyway, yeah, it's weird, but it still talks about so much. People don't talk, people kind of mention Fortran for historical reasons, but people talk about Lisp as if it's like an alive and thriving language, even though again it's, I mean, first of all, my own bias, what I don't see is what I believe is not popular, but it's weird. It's weird. Lisp is a very interesting language. I don't even know much about it. I've used Emacs Lisp. I still couldn't tell you much about Lisp other than it has weird syntax and uses lots of parentheses. I generally don't know what else to say. It's probably a very simple language, to be fair, but and I guess that's why as well. Emacs Lisp is Emacs Lisp, you make a Lisp. In fact, maybe I should make a Lisp for, because I've been thinking of I wanted an excuse to use OCaml again, just so I can try out ML's module system thing, the modules and the higher kind, first class module system. Very interesting. So I want to have an excuse to try that. So maybe I can make a Lisp at some point. I don't know. I mean, I need to make a language at some point. I'm planning these things, but I haven't actually tried implementing anything yet for any language. The most I've made so far is a calculator. So I'd like to try something, even if just for the sake of doing it, to practice making it.
Grew much faster than APL did, because many users could try things out and put their best code out there for others to use and to add to the language. Lisp is not used quite as much as it used to be, but parts of it live on in other languages, the best of which is called garbage collection.
Right. Yeah. I also don't know much about how Lisp was inspired other languages, because like you hear about like Haskell, inspired these features in Rust and other languages, or ML might have popularized a few things too. Probably inspired a large chunk of Haskell even. Um, Fortran was kind of the foundation for like C-like languages, I think. But then also, like you look at Fortran and it just looks so different from what you'd expect. Like you'd think the oldest language, commercial language, would like look like C, kind of like, but it's not. Like it's just like actual words. I think it has reals as a type. I don't know if it's always been that way, but like it does now. It's like what? It's very strange. Also, what's the Fortran written like on punch cards? How was Lisp made to run at all? Like, did that use punch cards? I don't know.
And I will not try to tell you now what that means in words of one syllable.
Garbage collection. Okay, so that's a Lisp feature, which is very, very interesting. I mean, how do you get, like, how do you go from Fortran, right, which is like I think a statically typed compiled language, I think, a bit more like C in that like it's imperative, and then like not shortly after you get Lisp, which is, I mean, like I guess it's kind of more functional, although it's also not really. It's kind of like a different paradigm. I don't know much about Lisp. I should probably do a deeper dive into it, but it's like it's just so different, and like it's garbage collected, like in the big 1958 when Fortran came out in 1957. You tell me that garbage collection was literally in existence. It's insane to even think about. Very different times.
I leave it to you as a task to try in your spare time. It is not that hard. This leads me to claim that from now on, a main goal in designing a language should be to plan for growth. The language must start small, and the language must grow as a set of users grows. I now think that I, as a language designer helping out with a Java programming language, need to ask not, should the Java programming language grow, but how should the Java programming language grow? There is more than one kind of growth, and more than one way to do it. But
was Java made, even? 91. 7 years. Wait. Lost Oak. 1995. So this talk was 3 years after Java. So it was probably very like revolutionary for the time. I mean, people thought it would kill C++, right? And I mean, it kind of did. I mean, like, it didn't kill it, but it definitely replaced it in a lot of the industry, to the point where Java became the most used programming language, I think, at some point. And then I believe now it might be JavaScript, maybe, or Python, one of the two. Man, that's crazy. I mean, I'm sure C++ didn't even like replace C in a lot of contexts, but like it definitely helped that you could run C++ and then run C projects in it. That probably did help with like extending it. But I'm just aware that there's a lot of C code out there, like a surprising amount of C code.
as we shall see, if the goal is to be quick and yet to do good work, one mode may be better by far than all others. There are two kinds of growth in a language. One can change the vocabulary, or one can change the rules that say what a string of words means.
Yeah. So most just vocabulary. I guess I think Lisp gives you more control over like the grammar of the language, but again, I've not looked into it. Like, it's just such a mystery to me, Lisp. Like, nothing has even come up with me. Like, I keep hearing about Lisp, but I haven't seen anything. Nothing's like come up in my feed about it. When I talk to other people, like, they don't like really mention any like actual features about it. They just kind of like refer to it, in like a kind of way. And it's like, well, what? I don't know. I've tried looking up like about Lisp, but like because there isn't like a standard for it, like Scheme is probably the closest there is to like a common Lisp. Is Lisp even a language, or is it more like a paradigm? I don't know. But I mean, the same goes for like lots of old languages, where like they don't really have like a standard anyway. C++ getting a standard was, I think, quite unusual for the time, and like C, like those were ISO. I think Lisp was just like an idea, and then different people implemented different implementations of it, and that's why you have different Lisps, and why a standard still hasn't even caught on. Like there's common Lisp and like Scheme and stuff like that, right? But like that's not a standard Lisp. It's just the Lisp that people have agreed on is like the common one, and that we're gonna call the common Lisp. Like notice how it's not called standard Lisp in the same way you have standard ML, and even SML. Like there's SML like the Harvard one, and there's other implementations of SML. So like despite being called standard ML, it's not really standard. So it's very strange, very very different era. Nowadays, you have Rust, which uses a whopping 1 implementation, and that's from the Rust Foundation, or the Zig Foundation, right? C++, you have 1 standard, but that's the ISO, and like there could have been competing standards, and you do have competing compilers. You have GCC, you have Clang. For Rust, there's 1 compiler. Well, there's 1 popular compiler. I do believe GNU was making, or is making, or has made a Rust compiler as well, but like it's not going to be anywhere near as like developed as Cargo is. And Zig, definitely just 1 compiler right now because like the language is evolving like crazy. So yeah, very very different times.
A library is a vocabulary designed to be added to a programming language to make its vocabulary larger.
Yeah.
A true library does not change the rules of meaning for the language, it just adds new words. You can see from this that, in my view, the code that lets you do a long jump in...
Well, overloading exists, I guess, and so do macros in C, but besides that...
C is not a true library.
Oh.
You can see from this that, in my view, the code that lets you do a long jump in C is not a true library.
What's a long
Of
jump?
course, there must be a way for a user to make libraries, but the key point is that the new words defined by a library should look just like the primitives of a language. Some languages are like this and some are not. Those that are not are harder to grow with the help of users. It may be good as well to have a way to add to the rules of meaning for a language. Some ways to do this work better than others. But in the same way, the language should let work done by a user look just like what was designed at the start. I would like to grow the Java brand programming language in such a way that users can do more of this. In the same way, there are 2 ways to do the growing. One is for 1 person or a small group to be in charge and to take in, test, judge, and add the work done by others.
Sorry, who is this guy? Guy Steele. Trying to design a complete and perfect programming language is the worst thing you can do. Isn't that what Zig's doing? Oh, this would be a good talk. Okay, so this upload has 163,000 views, so yeah. Also, this one's a newer upload. I don't know why it was only released like 6 years ago, but so it's not quite as niche as made it out to be. Like it's still like only 162,000 views, right? Which isn't as much as you'd expect from like I don't know a very important talk. He's been involved in several programming languages. He wrote specs for C, Common Lisp, Scheme, and Java. Okay, so he's definitely involved in Lisp. But also C, which is interesting. There's Star Lisp and C Star? What? Interesting. I guess C was ANSI C, like ANSI. That was the standard. So when did ISO take over C? Or is that ANSI C as well? Is ANSI ISO? I don't even know. No, because ISO is the international, but ANSI is American. Dude, there's so much history here, honestly. MIT. Yeah, different times. What? He participated in the development of the verse programming language? Are you serious? I need to look at verse anyway, but like, wow. To think that like, yeah, verse is a very interesting language that I need to look at. Wow, verse, Emacs, what? Why is he mentioning it for Emacs? He designed the original command set of Emacs, and imported text as well, like latex text. This guy! What? Known for Emacs, Programming Languages, Technical Standards. Wow. He's 71 years old. Man, this is quite something. Okay.
The other way is to just put the source code out there once things start to work and let each person do as he wills. To have a person in charge can slow things down, but to have no one in charge makes it harder to add up the work of many persons.
Yeah.
The way that I think is faster and better than all others does both. Put the source code out there and let all persons play with it, but have a person in charge who is a quick judge of good work and who will take it in and shove it back out fast. You don't have to use what he ships and you don't have to give back your work, but he gives all persons a fast way to spread new code to those who want it. The best example of
A package manager.
this way to do things is Linux, which is an operating system, which is a program that keeps track of other programs in the computer and gives each its due in time and space. You like that? Which is an operating system, which is a program that keeps track of other programs in the computer and gives each its due in time and space. You like that?
Wow.
You ought to read what Eric Raymond had to say of how Linux came to be. I shall tell you a bit of it once I define 2 more words for you. A cathedral is a huge church. It may be made of stone. It may fill you with awe. But the key thought in the mind of Eric Raymond is that there is but one design, one grand plan, which may take a long time, many years to make real. As the years pass, few changes are made to the plan. Many, many persons are needed to build it, but there is just one designer. A bazaar is a place with many small shops or stalls where you can buy things from many persons who are there to sell their wares. The key thought here is that each one sells what he wants to sell and each one buys what he wants to buy. There is no one plan, and each seller or buyer may change his mind at any time. Eric Raymond wrote a short work called The Cathedral and the Bazaar, in which he looks at how programs are built or have been built in the past. You can find it on his website. He talks of how he built a mail fetching program with the help of more than 200 users. He quotes Fred Brooks as saying, "More users find more bugs," and backs him up with tales from his example of building a program in the bazaar style. As for the role of programmer in charge, Eric Raymond says that it is fine to come up with good thoughts, but much better to know them when you see them in the works of others. You can get a lot more done that way. Linux rose to its heights of fame and wide use in much the same way, though on a much larger scale.
Sorry, when did Linux release? I know that Git is more recent than I thought, I think. I think Git is like 2008 or like 4 or 6. That's not what I said. Yeah, 2005. So Linux was 1991. Okay, not too bad. Yeah, because like the way people like make it sound, they make it sound like Linus like made Linux and then made Git because he was like, oh, I want to version control this. Like, but no, like there was like a 15-year gap, 14-year gap, but still obviously crazy.
To take this thought to the far end of the line, it may be that one could write an operating system by putting 1,000,000 apes to work at 1,000,000 typing machines, then just spotting the bits of good work that come out by chance and pasting them up to make a whole. That might take a long time, I guess. Too bad. But the key point of the bazaar is not that you can get many persons to work with you at a task, for cathedral builders had a great deal of help too. Nor is the key point that you get help with the designing as well as the building, though that is in fact a big win. No, the key point is that in the bazaar style of building a program, or designing a language, or what you will, the plan can change in real time to meet the needs of those who are working on it. This tends to make users stay with it as time goes by. They will take joy in working hard and helping out if they know that their wants and needs have some weight, and their hard work can change the plan for the better. Their better. Which brings me to the high point of my talk.
Right.
It seems, in the last few years at least, that...
See, that is a good time to drink water, is what I'm saying. Because like, I've watched a lot of talks recently, and they just like take sips of water just randomly, and it's really like disruptive. You gotta time it. You gotta time it.
But if one is asked to speak at this meeting, one must quote Christopher Alexander. I know a bit of his work, though not a lot, and I must say thanks to Dick Gabriel for pointing out to me a quote that has a lot to do with the main point of this talk.
Okay, I'm so sorry. Who is Dick Gabriel? Mentioned like 4 times. Is that even him? It's probably not.
I'm sad to say that I do not know what this quote means, because Christopher Alexander uses many words of more than one syllable, and does not define them first. But I've learned to say these words by rote, and it may be that you out there can glean some thoughts of use to you. Christopher Alexander says, master plans have 2 additional unhealthy characteristics. To begin with, the existence of a master plan alienates the users. After all, the very existence of a master plan means, by definition, that the members of the community can have little impact on the future shape of their community because most of the important decisions have already been made. In a sense, under a master plan, people are living with a frozen future, able to affect only relatively trivial details. When people lose the sense of responsibility for the environment they live in and realize they are merely cogs in someone else's machine, how can they feel any sense of identification with the community or any sense of purpose there? I think this means
That is interesting. And I wonder how much that influences the popularity of programming languages. Like, would you say that Rust is like that? I mean, it's definitely strong on like its safety, right? But I'm sure it's open to improvement in other ways. I don't know. Are there any languages that even are like have like a master plan? Or maybe that's the point. Like if there have been, you wouldn't have heard of them. I don't know.
Means in part that it is good to give your users a chance to buy in and pitch in. It is good for them and it is good for you. In point of fact, a number of cathedrals were built in the bizarre mode. Does this mean then that it is of no use to design? Not at all. But instead of designing a thing, you need to design a way of doing. And this way of doing must make some choices now, but leave other choices to a later time. Which brings me to the word you have all been waiting for. A pattern is a plan that has some number of parts and shows you how each part turns a face to the others, how each joins with the others or stands off, how each part does what it does and how the others aid it or drag it down, and how all the parts may be grasped as a whole and made to serve as one thing, for some higher goal or as part of a larger pattern. A pattern should give hints or clues as to when and where it is best put to use. What is more, some of the parts of a pattern may be holes or slots in which other things may be placed later. A good pattern will say how changes can be made in the course of time. Thus, some choices of the plan are built in as part of the pattern, and other choices wait till the time when the pattern is to be used. In this way, a pattern stands for a design space in which you can choose, on the fly, your own path for growth and change. It is good to design a thing, but it can be far better and far harder to design a pattern. Best of all is to know when to use a pattern. Now for some more computer words. A datum is a set of bits. Data is the mass noun for a set of datums. An object is a datum, the meanings of whose parts is laid down by a set of language rules. In the Java programming language, these rules use types to make clear which parts of an object may cite other objects. Objects may be grouped to form classes. Knowing the class of an object tells you most of what you need to know about how that object acts. Objects may have fields. Each field of an object can hold a datum. Which datum it holds may change from time to time. Each field may have a type, which tells you what data can be in that field at runtime. And what is more, it tells you what data cannot be in that field at runtime. A method is a named piece of code that is part of an object. If you can name or cite an object, then you can call a method of that object. The method then does its thing. The Java programming language has objects and classes and fields and methods and types. Now I shall speak of some things that the Java programming language does not yet have. A generic type is a map from one or more types to types. Put another way, a generic type is a pattern for building types. A number of groups of persons have set forth ways to add generic types to the Java programming language. Each way has its own good points. We heard 3 talks on adding generic types to the Java programming language at this meeting less than 3 and 20 hours ago.
Wow, that's actually interesting. Because this was 3 years after Java being made, right? So yeah, it's not generics at this point. That's kind of wild. I mean, C++ had generics, right? But well, through templates. But Java generics, I think, are quite a bit more like Rust generics, in that you can't. Well, it's not a true and complete system.
An operator is a glyph, such as a plus sign that can be used in a language as if it were a word. In the C or the Java programming language, as in English, the sign first known as and per se and is an operator.
Ampersand. Hold on. Yeah, it's actually and, which is, so that's funny, that's good.
But a full stop or a quote mark is not an operator. A word is said to be overloaded if it is made to mean 2 or more things, and the hearer has to choose the meaning based on the rest of what is said. For example, using the rules defined near the start of this talk, a verb form such as painted might be a past tense or a past participle, and it is up to you, the hearer, to make the call as to which I mean when I say it. Sometimes an overloaded word is called polymorphic, which means that the word has many forms. But the truth is that the word has but one form and many meanings. The definition of a word may be polymorphic, but the word as such is not. An operator can be overloaded in C++, but right now, operators in the Java programming language cannot be overloaded by the programmer, even though the names of methods may be overloaded. I would like to change that. I have said in the past, and will say now, that I think it would be a good thing for the Java programming language to add generic types and to let the user define overloaded operators. Just as a user can code methods that can be used in just the same way as methods that are built in, the user ought to have a way to define operators for user-defined classes that can be used in just the same way as operators that are built in. What is more, I would add a kind of class that is of light weight. one whose objects can be cloned at will with no harm, and so could be kept on a stack for speed, and not just...
Sorry, did that happen? I mean, surely. I guess it's so object-oriented. It doesn't have it. That's crazy, they never added it. Wow. I mean, operator overloading, although it can be abused, as we can see in C++, you know, standard C out, but when it's used correctly, you pretty much get Rust, right, with the trait system. You can emulate a trait system in C++ by having operator overloading, like, in some shape or form, in that the code you write looks like that. It's just that Rust does it through, like a system that restricts how you can do it. Actually, that's false. You can overload plus in Rust and have it do completely different things. I guess the exception is that you can't change the shape of the function. So you can't have plus take I believe, I mean, I don't know how Rust defines its plus trait, but its add trait. But I believe you can't do something like you could with standard C out. Maybe you can though, I don't know. It's just that you wouldn't though, because to do it you have to explicitly say it's add, you know, and it's my trait add. Whereas in C++ you just overload the operator, so it feels a bit more sneaky. Yeah. Anyway.
Just in the heap. Classes of this kind would be well as operators that are built in. What is more, I would add a kind of class that is of light weight, one whose objects can be cloned at will with no harm, and so could be kept on a stack for speed, and not just in the heap.
Wow.
Classes of this kind would be well suited for use as user-defined number types, but would have other uses too. You can find a plan for all this on a web page by James Gosling. There are a few other things we could add as well, such as tail calls, and ways to read and write those machine flags for numbers whose points float. But these are small language tweaks next to generic types and overloaded operators. If we grow the language in these few ways, then I think we will not need to grow it in 100 other ways. The users can take on the rest of the task. To see why, think on these examples. A complex number is a pair of numbers. There are rules for how to find the sum of two complex numbers, or a complex number times a complex number. Some programmers like to use them a lot. Others do not use them at all. So, should we make complex number a type in the Java programming language? Some say yes, of course. Many others say no. A rational number is a pair of numbers. There are rules, not the same as the rules for complex numbers, of course, for how to find the sum of two rational numbers, or a rational number times a rational number. A few programmers like to use them a lot. Most do not use them at all. So, should we make rational number a type in the Java programming language? An interval is a pair of numbers. There are rules, not the same as the rules for complex numbers, or rational numbers, of course, for how to find the sum of two intervals, or an interval times an interval. A few programmers like to use them a lot, and wish all the other programmers who use numbers would use them too. But most do not use them at all. So, should we make interval a type in the Java programming language? John Horton Conway once defined a game to be a pair of sets of games. See his book on numbers and games. Then he pointed out that some games may be thought of as numbers that say how many moves it will take to win the game. There are rules for how to find the sum of two games, and so on. From this he worked out, for hundreds of kinds of real games, how to know which player will win. I think, 3 persons in the world know how to use this kind of number. Should we make it a type in the Java programming language?
What? What's he getting on here? Getting at?
A vector is a row of numbers all of the same type, with each place in the row named by the kind of number we first spoke of in this talk. There are rules. In fact, for vectors of length 3, there are 2 ways to do a vector times a vector, so you can have twice the fun. Vectors of length 3 or 4 are a great aid in making bits on the screen look like scenes in the real world. So, should we make vector a type in the Java programming language? A matrix is a set of numbers laid out in a square, and there are rules. So should we make matrix a type in the Java programming language? And so on, and so on, and so on. I might say yes to each one of these, but it is clear that I must say no to all of them. And so would James Gosling and Bill Joy. To add them all to the Java programming language would be just too much. Some parts of the programming vocabulary are fit for all programmers to use, but other parts are just for their own niches. It would not be fair to weigh down all programmers with the need to have or to learn all the words for every niche use. We should not make the Java programming language a cathedral. But a plain bazaar might be too loose. What we need is more like a shopping mall, where there are not quite as many choices, but most of the goods are well designed and sellers stand behind what they sell. I could speak at length on the ways in which a shopping mall is like a cathedral, but not here, not now. Now, the user can define objects for such numbers to have methods that act in the right ways, but code to use such numbers would look strange and be slow. Programmers used to adding numbers with plus signs would fetch to have methods that act in the right ways, but code to use such numbers would look strange and be slow. Programmers used to adding numbers with plus signs would fetch. In fact, the Java programming language does have a class of big numbers that have methods for adding them and telling which is larger and all the rest. And you cannot use the plus sign to add such numbers, and programmers who have to use them do fetch. Generic types and overloaded operators would let a user code up all of these, and in such a way that they would look in all ways just like the types that are built in. They would let users grow the Java programming language in a smooth and clean way. And it would not just be for numbers. Generic types would be good for coding hash sets, for example, and there are many other uses. And each user would not have to code up such number classes each for his own use. When a language gives you the right tools, such classes can be coded by a few and then put up as libraries for others to use, or not, as they choose. But they don't have to be built in as part of the base language. If you give a person a fish, he can eat for a day. If you teach a person to fish, he can eat his whole life long. If you give a person tools, he can make a fishing pole, and lots of other tools. He can build a machine to crank out fishing poles. In this way, he can help others to catch fish.
Okay.
Meta means that you step back from your own place. What you used to do is now what you see. What you were is now what you act on. Verbs turn to nouns. What you used to think of as a pattern is now treated as a thing to put in the slot of an other pattern. A metafoo is a foo in whose slot you can put parts of a foo. In a way, a language design of the old school is a pattern for programs. But now we need to go meta. We should now think of a language design as being a pattern for language designs, a tool for making more tools at the same time. This is the nub of what I want to say.
We should make a language be a tool for making other languages. What?
A language design can no longer be a thing. It must be a pattern for growth, a pattern for growing the pattern, for defining the patterns that programmers can use for their real work and their main goal. My point is that a good programmer in these times does not just write programs. A good programmer builds a working vocabulary. In other words, a good programmer does language design, though not from scratch, but building on the frame of a base language. In the course of giving this talk, because I started with a small language, I've had to define 50 or more new words or phrases and 16 names of persons or things. And I laid out 6 rules for making new words from old ones. In this way, I added to the base language. If I were to write a book, starting from just the words of one syllable, I'm sure that I would have to define hundreds of new words. It should give no one pause to note that the writing of a program having 1 million lines of code might need many, many hundreds of new words. That is to say, a new language built on the base language. I will be so bold as to say that it cannot be done any other way. Well, there may be one other way, hundreds of new words. That is to say, a new language built on the base language. I will be so bold as to say that it cannot be done any other way. Well, there may be one other way, which is to use a large, rich programming language that has grown over tens or hundreds of years, that has all we need to say what we want to say, that we are taught as we grow up and take for granted. It may be that 100 years from now, there will be a programming language that by then has stood the test of time, needs no more changes for most uses, and is used by all persons who write programs because each child learns it in school. But that is not where we are now.
Will that be a bloody utopia?
So, language design is not at all the same kind of work it was 30 years ago or 20 years ago. Back then, you could set out to design a whole language and then build it yourself or with a small team because it was small, and because you would then do with it what you would then do with it was small. Now programs are big messes with many needs. A small language won't do the job. If you design a big language all at once and then try to build it all at once, it will fail. You will end up late, and some other small language will take your place. It would be great if there were some small programming language that felt large. The way basic English is small, but feels large in some ways. But I don't know how to do it, and I have good cause to doubt that it can be done at all. In its day, APL was a small language that felt large, but our needs have grown, and APL did not have a good pattern for growth. So I think the sole way to win is to plan for growth. To plan for growth with help from users. This is a win for you because you have help. This is a win for the users because they get to have their say and get to bend the growth to their needs. But you need to have one or more persons too, or one or more groups, to take on the task of judging and testing and sifting what the users do and say, and adding what they think best to the big pile of code, in the hope that other users will trust what they say and not have to go to all the work to test and judge and sift each new claim or each new piece of code, each for his own self. Parts of the language must be designed to help the task of growth, of growing a language. A good set of types, ways for a user to define new types, to add new words and new rules to the language, to define and use all sorts of patterns. All these are needed. The designer should not, for example, define 20 kinds of number types in the language. But there will be users who, all told, beg for 20 different kinds of numbers. Different. Beg for 20 kinds of numbers.
He says in the legal world. Word. Anyway, yeah, it's actually interesting because I was thinking of having a language where you have one type of number. Just one. Well, that's not true actually. Different abstract numbers, but one concrete number. Just the bit, or the trit, or the qubit, depending on whatever system you're using. And then you define the other ones in terms of that. Obviously these would still be shipped with a language anyway, like a U8 and a uint 16 would still come with a language anyway, just because it's convenient. Maybe imported, maybe not, but the exception with that, I would also have a number type. So a number is just any number that you like literally any number, like 3.1415 or infinity, like any number. You could say infinity. You could say that infinity is not a number, but whatever. Let's say 2 infinity, but not including it. And then I would have chars, and those can be used to make strings. But a char would just be, well, no, a char would be a separate data type. You can define mappings from chars to numbers, but ultimately they're different data types. And then I'd also have just general enums. So I mean, numbers are also enums technically, but because there's some types, like this or that. But those are specially defined within the language, so that you can use numbers and strings and chars out of the box. And also create your own enums. Boolean would probably be in the language, as true or false, but that would also be an enum. Whether it's implemented as an enum, I don't know yet, but conceptually it would be. And I guess that's it, really. You don't really need I think you can derive everything you need from those. So the integers are just all the whole numbers. How would you define that? I don't know. Actually, maybe I would need to define the integers as well, because they're kind of like an intrinsic definition. Like a whole number, can't really be defined in terms of other numbers. If anything, you would define the real numbers in terms of integers, right? Because you could say add a decimal point and then keep going on there. So I guess that'd be another primitive type. But otherwise, if you want to make a uint 16, you would map the bits of, you'd map 16 bits to numbers, and that'd be the definition. So stuff like that, and then that because it's so atomic, that language should be able to scale and grow in unforeseen ways. It could be used on ternary systems. It could be used in quantum systems, right? Could be interesting. But yeah, I mean, one of my goals for True, or it's really whatever language I end up making, is for it to age well, and to stand the test of time, and even outlive binary system computers. Because why not? If I can do it without making the actual language feel complex, but as you write it, it's keeping it ergonomic basically. Then why not? I get the power, and users get the power that they need to extend the language in whatever, within reason.
This is hard. The language should have a way for the user to define number types that work well with each other, and with plus signs and other such signs, and with the many ways of pushing bits in and out of the computer. One might define just 1 or 2 number types at the start to show how it ought to be done. Then, leave the rest to the users. Help them all as best you can to work side by side and not nose to nose. You may find that you need to add warts as part of the design so that you can get it out the door fast, with the goal of taking out the warts at a later time. Now there are warts and then there are warts. With care, one can design a wart so that it will not be too hard to take out or patch up later on. But if you do not take care at the start, you may be stuck for years to come with a wart you did not plan. Some warts are not bad things you put in, but good things you leave out. Have a plan to add those good things later, if you should choose to do so. And make sure that other parts of your design don't cut you off from adding those good things when the time is right. I hope to bring these thoughts to bear on the Java programming language. The Java programming language has done as well as it has up to now because it started small, I think. It was not hard to learn, and it was not hard to port. It has grown quite a bit since then. If the design of the Java programming language, as it is now, had been put forth 3 years ago, it would have failed. Of that, I'm sure. Programmers would have cried, too big, too much hair, I can't deal with all that. But in real life, it worked out fine because the users have grown with the language and learned it piece by piece. And they buy into it because they've had some say in how to change the language. And the Java programming language needs to grow yet some more, but I hope not a lot more. At least, I think only a few more rules are needed. And the rest can be done with libraries, most of them built by users and not by Sun.
This is so interesting in retrospect.
If we add hundreds of new things to the Java brand programming language, we will have a huge language, but it will take a long time to get there. But if we add a few things, just the right things, generic types, operator overloading, user-defined types of lightweight for use as numbers and small vectors and such, and some other things that are designed to let users make and add things for their own use, I think we can go a long way and much faster. We need to put tools for language growth in the hands of users. I hope that we can, in this way or some other way, design a programming language where we don't seem to spend most of our time talking and writing in words of just one syllable. One of the good things I can say for short words is that they make for short talks. They gave me an hour and a half for this talk, and I've used less than an hour. Once I'm done, you'll have time to go out in the hall, have a cup of tea, and talk with your friends. But first, I would like to tell you what I have learned from the task of designing this talk. In choosing to give up the many long words that I've come to know since I was a child, words that have many fine shades of meaning, I made this task much harder than it needs to be. I hope that you have not found it too hard on your ears. But I found that sticking to this rule made me think. I had to take time to think through how to phrase each thought. And there was this choice for each new word. Is it worth the work to define it? Or should I just stick with the words I have? Should I do the work of defining a new word such as mirror? Or should I just say looking glass each time I want to speak of one? As an example, I was tempted more than once to state the ly rule for making new words that change what verbs mean. But in the end, I chose to cast all such words to one side and make do. And I came that close to defining the word without. But each time, for better or for worse, I found some other way to phrase my thought. I learned in my youth, from the books of such great teachers of writing as Strunk and White, that it is better to choose short words when I can. I should not choose long, hard words just to make other persons think that I know a lot. I should try to make my thoughts clear. If they are clear and right, then other persons can judge my work as it ought to be judged. And I'm sure you will. From the work of planning this talk, in which I have tried to go with this rule of short words much farther than in the past, I found that for the most part, they were right. Short words work well, if we choose them well. Thus, I think that programming languages need to be more like the languages that we speak. But it might be good, too, if we were to use the languages we speak more in the way that we now use programming languages. All in all, I think it might be a good thing if those who rule our lives, those in high places who do the work of state, those who judge what we do, and most of all, those who make the laws, were made to define their terms and say all else that they say in words of one syllable. For I have found that this mode of speech makes it hard to hedge.
No one speaks better than me. Trust me, no one knows words better than me. I've got a very rich set of words. Some might even say vocabulary. But I don't want to be used big, fancy words. I don't know.
It takes work and great care and some skill to find just the right way to say what you want to say. But in the end, you seem to have no choice but to talk straight. If you do not veer wide of the truth, you are forced to hit it dead on. I urge you, too, to give it a try. Thank you.
Okay, I mean, it was a good talk, like, talk-wise. What did it, yeah, I mean, I didn't take any notes on that, because I didn't really think, like, what needs to be noted there. Yeah, I mean, write a language to grow, right, to be future-proof, but, I don't know, I mean, I feel like APL's died for different reasons than it not having a way to like define new functions easily or whatever. I feel like it's more just that the syntax is like so hyper specific that you need to get a special keyboard for it, and like that's just not anything that people are gonna do. I don't know. Yeah, like, I mean, like, was C built to grow well? Probably not, but like, people still use it anyway. So I don't know. It's good advice for how to make a good language, right? That will stand the test of time. But I mean, it goes without saying, doesn't it? Yeah. Actually, I don't even know. Like, I don't really have takeaways for this. Let me check the other video real quick, just to see what the comments say. Because I feel like I didn't really learn that much from that. Oh, my friend just called me. What's even different in this recording? I don't know. KSPL class, what we hear, film by skipping, uploaded, yeah. I mean, this is why I watched the other recording, because of this comment. I don't know how much of a big thing it was, though. This is cool. Deadlines, sprints, and stakeholders. Because, like, I guess it's not even so much about building a language that will grow, but building, like, software and, like, libraries that will grow, right? Yeah, like, it goes way beyond programming languages, as things in this space tend to do, because of how programming, like, the concepts literally encompass all kinds of architecture. It's funny. Architecture means ways to find and free space filled with things you don't need, so you will have space to put new things that you might need. Yeah, good enough, I guess. Someone took notes on dev.to of all things? No, I don't know. I want to open it in a new site. Why can't I? His insights apply directly as the fundamental building blocks of computing infrastructure move towards open source projects. Yeah, I mean that was very true. I don't know. A popular language or successful language is just what is commonly agreed upon as useful, and will constantly be redefined in those terms. I reckon the ideal scenario is that we end up with a tree of useful languages, where the languages closer to the trunk are more generally useful, and those in the branches are more niche/domain specific, but the branch languages are supersets of their ancestor languages. If you need more niche specific language to model a problem, use it, but it should be derived as newly minted clauses. What? It's an impressive presentation, but I'm just not really sure what I'm meant to take away from it that I didn't already know. And I doubt it's like, oh, things have changed so much since then that now we don't even have to think about it. Or maybe it's that case, I don't know. Here's some notes. I don't use WTO, but it's, yeah, whatever. Okay, you should design languages to start small and then grow. I guess that's the main takeaway, right? Don't make a language that tries to be big out of the gate, but it's rather small and grows over time. Like, take Zig for instance. Zig is very much not doing that, although it wants to be small anyway. It's not trying to stay. Sorry, I'm not showing my screen. Zig isn't trying to stay small. How do I say this? Zig is trying to be minimalist, but it's not. But like that doesn't mean like it's trying to release lacking features. Like it wants to be the perfect language and then release and make very few updates. That's the goal. So that's goes against that. It's interesting. Otherwise, though, like I think Rust was at least as early as 2014, and it only really became like really popular in like 2020, 2018 maybe, but like really kick off more like 2020 like 2022. And I wonder if that's because it evolved since its initial release. You should design languages so that users help you grow them easily. Like again, like what's that really mean? Let everyone play, but have a BDFL decide what to take in or out. Right. It's good for you and your users to give them a chance to buy and pitch in. Right. That's good advice. If you design a small number of user patterns, you can say no to a lot more things that not everyone uses, rather than them to find things they will use. Generic types and operator overloading are two such patterns that let users solve all sorts of problems. Okay, going meta, we should now think. It's interesting because like with Rust and traits again, like you kind of have these two birds with one stone, where the type system, well, mind you, generics aren't really. Yeah, I guess generics more go with types. With traits. They aren't part of a trait system per se. Use simple words in real life too. Okay. I don't know if it's true that like C++ wouldn't have spread if it was hoisted all at once. Because like it's still built on top of C for starters, which already makes people like a lot more approachable. Like people still learn C today. Like there are new people who learn C++. Like me, despite. I mean, for me, it was my first language even, so like yeah, like it was daunting how big it was, but I knew that I didn't need to learn it all, you know? Or like at least not immediately. And I mean, and I like you still don't have to learn it all. Like you don't have to. If I do, it purely just for the fun of it, and maybe to like get into it, like helping with the implementation of it and stuff like that. But I have no real desire to do that right now. Right, in a race, a small language with warts will beat a well-designed language because users will not wait for the right thing. Yeah, it's true. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Cool talk. I guess it's nothing really new, but yeah, just to keep in mind, small language, good. Small language will grow, good. You know, release the egg, not the dragon. Yeah. That's probably a good like analogy, but yeah, I mean, I wish I could say more, but I don't know. We'll just see how things develop with my language. Because like I don't really. I want to design a lot of the features now, because there are things that I know need to be decided before I go further, because if I do not do if I don't just decide them now, those will be warts that I cannot change later because they're so fundamental to the language's design. But like once I get to a certain point where like I know like how my functions will look, if I even have functions and variables and like types and all that, once I have a good idea of how like that works and how the syntax will look, then I'll probably just focus on, okay, I have this core stuff. There are some ideas for other things that I can do, so I'm going to try to think of, can I have those languages, have those features be implemented later without breaking what I currently have? And if the answer is yes, I will go ahead and work on a first release of the language. That's what I will do. But I need to get the fundamental stuff out first. And I don't know how much stuff will end up being fundamental. But by that I mean like a language is a fragile thing. No. Syntax is a fragile thing. Because it's a lot harder to add features. Sorry, it's a lot harder to... You can add new features, you can remove features, you can change features, but the syntax is a lot harder to change. So I'll need to think about that, because syntax is so, like, to me syntax is so important. There's a joke that syntax is not as important as you think, but then there's the other joke, which is that syntax is more important than you think, and they go together. I really want to get a good syntax. And it's going to be hard to have a good syntax if I don't know what features my language is going to have. So I need to decide that now, basically. So yeah, I'll keep on working on that. Peace out, Girl Scouts.